So good night, good evening. How are we all doing today? Happy Friday. It's not good night yet, it's just hello. Let's open in prayer. I have a good word to read today, so we definitely want to make sure the Spirit's here to guide us through it. Dear Father, we thank you for that great praise and worship tonight, to hear all of us just here under this roof, just giving you praise and being grateful for whatever we have, Lord. Some of us have very little and some of us have much. But I know in our hearts, Lord, that we all have just what we need in you, and we want to continue to serve you and honor you in all that we do. In the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen. Amen. A couple weeks ago, I preached to you guys, and while I was preaching, we came across a Bible verse that really kind of spun off in my heart that led me to want to just kind of write a whole other sermon. So today's sermon is called Talk to Me. I was really blessed today. It was a beautiful day, beautiful fall day, and my youngest son, my 15-year-old, is finally starting to get into hiking, getting outdoors. And I love hiking. I've always been adventurous that way. And it's been really good bonding time for him and I. And in the process, I'm learning to communicate with my son. And he's learning to feel comfortable opening up and talking to me. And it's been a really good process. Now hear what I just told you. I'm learning to communicate with my son. Now, this is another example of things being different in the spirit and different in the flesh. But it's something we need to pay attention to because we are creatures of flesh. And while we need to pay attention to how we develop our relationship with our godly Father, many of us need to pay attention to how we as fathers or sons have a relationship with our earthly father. Okay? One of the biggest misconceptions about talking to other people is that they're just going to understand you. As a child of God, we talk to God in order for us to understand his nature so that we can understand ourselves better. But when we're talking to our children, we can't take that same approach. We can't expect our children to know how to talk to us. Well, it makes sense, because as children of God, we don't always know how to talk to him. But it's important. So as a father now, I'm getting very blessed with the opportunity to be able to talk to my boys, and they're very different children. I have to communicate to them extremely differently. One's very logical and systematic. One has a lot of wisdom and common sense, and he's just so much easier to get through to. But both of them, I have to take certain approaches to talk to them. Communication is a skill, gentlemen. Learning to talk is a very, very, very important thing to do, because we need to talk. We need to be able to understand each other. We need to be able to get along. We can't just get along with hand signals and rolling people off and expecting them to know what we're talking about. We need to learn to communicate. Some people are really good at talking. I have a natural gift for talking. This is why I'm up here preaching. I like it. But there's a difference between talking with purpose and just talking. I'm sure you know that person that sometimes they talk and they just never shut up. And they go on and on and on and on and on. You're not really getting much out of it, but darn it, they never take a breath, so you can never get a word in edgewise. We know who they are. It's not really edifying. man, he's cracking up. So either he's getting spiritual conviction right now, or else he's got something he's dealing with. But I love to see that. But it's truth. It's truth. And then there's other people that don't feel good talking. So what do? They don't talk. They shut down. And I'm not sure which is better. In fact, I think not talking is ultimately worse. Because as we don't talk, we don't resolve things. We need to communicate to resolve things. We can't get in our own head. We can't always think that we're good, that the way we're doing things is okay, because that's how we've always done it. As I was getting dressed today, I was reminded of a story, and as I'm driving over, I'm like, yeah, this is going to fit. So I'm going to share the story about a man who was a very well-dressed man, very good man. He's in very, very good shape. And he spent his whole life living righteously, and all of a sudden one day he gets these symptoms. His eyes start to bulge out, and his ears start turning black, and he doesn't know what's going on. So he goes and sees all these doctors and specialists, and he can't figure it out. They won't tell him. He just keeps going to doctors. So eventually the specialists just say, "Sir, I think you're going to die. We don't know what's wrong. Your eyes keep bulging, your ears are purple, and we can't help you. So prepare for the end." So this man, he's like, well, I'm just going to go travel the world then. I'm going to travel the world and see everything and spend all my money. So the first thing he does is he goes to Rome and he gets a brand new suit. He says, I'm going to do this in style. So he goes to the best tailor in Italy, and this guy can just look at him and know all of his measurements. And he gets him the right pants and the right shoes, and he says, grab this man a shirt with a size 12 collar. And the man says, no, I'm a size 10 collar. And the guy goes, no, you're a size 12. Absolutely not. My whole life I've been a size 10, and that's all that I wear is a size 10. And he goes, sir, as a professional of my trade for many years, I can tell you, if you wear a size 10 collar, eventually your eyes will bulge out and your ears will turn purple. So you see, sometimes we are just not looking in the right direction for the answers that we need, and we get misinformation. Okay? We need to learn to talk. We need to learn to communicate. So let's start with, there's 3 different ways to talk. We talk to God, we talk to each other, or we talk to ourselves. If the third one's a large problem of yours, I'm going to hand you off to Pastor and let him deal with that. I'm going to focus on talking to God and talking to each other. All right, that's what I'm more trained for. So talking to God. Let's start there because it's important. We can go through this entire Bible, and literally we're going to start at the very beginning, and we're going to talk about talking to God. You see, in the very beginning, when God was planting his people, when he was starting his patriarchs, when he was starting with Jacob and Moses, he talked to them. He did. There are examples in the Bible, and we're going to start our first verse here in Genesis 32:30, and this is Jacob, one of our most early patriarchs. And it says straight in there, I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been spared. Now, the preface to this story, if we know it, Jacob came face to face with God, and he wrestled with him all night long. Okay? Now, we know that he wasn't physically wrestling with something. He was wrestling with the nature of God. It is, Genesis 32:30. And again, you read a little before it, you read a little bit after to understand the context of the story. He wrestled with God to the point where he was injured. He wrestled all night with God. He wrestled with God's nature. You see, when you see somebody face to face, you're getting to know them on an intimate level. Okay, and this is what the Old Testament, the term face to face, it not only means in person. I'm looking at Michael, Michael's looking at me. And honestly, I prefer that. I don't like all this video conferencing, even talking on phones. Because something about being face to face, you could read their body language. You could read their facial expression. You could know when you need to maybe back off a conversation and when you need to kind of fire into it a little bit. Face to face is important. But back in this time, this was how God got to express his nature to the human race. Now, he obviously couldn't do it to everybody. God didn't get up on the pulpit and preach to thousands. He left that for Jesus. However, we know that the Old Testament is always a reflection of Jesus. So when we hear that he was wrestling with God to get to know his nature, and he saw God's nature, well, we know you can't see God and survive. So maybe, just possibly, he saw Jesus, because we know Jesus represents God's nature. So now we're going to jump ahead a little bit further, a few generations down, and we're going to get into Exodus. We're going to talk about a time when this guy named Moses was leading all the Jews out of exile and through the desert. And it was a very bad time. It was a hard time. People were chaotic. People were all over the place, and he had to lead them. I'm sorry? I haven't gone to the verse yet. We're going to get there. If you want to get ahead, it's Exodus 33:11 is the verse we're going to eventually get to. But as a leader, Moses wasn't a great communicator. He was not a good talker. What an irony our God has. To take a man with a stutter, who's for the most part lived in exile for most of his life, and all of a sudden, hey, you got to lead people. Go ahead, you got to talk to people. You have got to communicate my will to the people. Man, that's a rough one. So for Moses, it was kind of cool because he got to go to this place. It was a tent that they built. It was called the Tent of Meeting. And he was the only one who was allowed to go there. It was part of the tabernacle that they set up and followed. So he would go in there and he would actually talk to God. Exodus 33:11 says, in the tent of meeting, the Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one speaks to a friend. Okay. Now again, we read that and we're going to sit here and think they're looking at each other. But the Bible does a really cool thing. If you jump forward to 22:20, it says specifically there, when we're getting a little bit deeper into it, it goes right to Moses. It says, you may not look directly at my face, for no man may see my face and live. So again, if he was face to face with God talking to him, who is he talking to? Maybe Jesus, right? Because Jesus has the nature of God. So if you want to know God's nature, you need to know Jesus. Now that was the last time that God talked to somebody face to face in the Bible. Because later he starts giving us his will through dreams. And he starts using these guys called the prophets. And these prophets, they would get these dreams and they would share them and they would express the will of God. But even the prophets, they never talked to God face to face. They only knew his will through dreams. And a lot of the times they didn't understand the dreams much better than what they were saying. I don't know if you've ever gotten a dream from God, but they're not always clear. And sometimes you get dreams and you wake up and you don't even remember the dreams, but God just used the dream to kind of program you. So you say what you need to say the next day, and you're like, whoa, where'd that come from? And God's sitting there saying, yeah, that was from that dream I gave you the other night that you didn't remember. That's okay. That's how God works. But that's what his promise was to us, that he'll talk to us through our dreams. because he stopped talking to the leaders directly. Imagine eventually the leaders just got tired of listening and didn't really pass the word on properly. So it was important to get to understand God's nature because, again, we know that God knows us. God knows every hair on our head. He knows everything about us. So, again, going back to a person communication, when you talk to a person, it's a back and forth. And you talk to another person with the intent of getting to know them and getting them to know you. But you don't need to do that when you talk to God. Guess what? God already knows you. The difference is when you get to talk to God and you learn his nature, you get to know you a little bit better. Okay? You can't understand who you are in the spirit if you don't understand God's nature. I'm going to give you a cool analogy that God gave me today. It just popped in my head, and I think it's really explains it. A lot of people read the Bible, and they get all the stuff out of the Bible. They read all the verses. They read all the text. They could even quote a few of them. So now I say take every word and every verse out of the Bible and pretend it's a puzzle piece. Okay? And they're all different colors, and they're all different shapes, and you throw them all over a table. Now, your goal as you build a puzzle is obviously to put all the pieces together so you can get the whole vision. Now, if all the different verses of the Bible are puzzle pieces, there's going to be a lot of puzzle pieces at first. But guess what? You can't put that puzzle together by yourself. You see all the words, you see all the pieces, and somebody tells you what the final picture is supposed to be, but you still, for the life of you, no matter how long you work on that puzzle, it takes forever for you to really figure it out because you're not seeing it from God's perspective. When you start talking to God, when you start understanding who he is, and again, we do it through what? Through prayer, through meditation, through reading the Bible. I hope if when you guys get out of here, all you remember of me is me being that pastor who kept reminding you to pray, meditate, and read the Bible. Take that home. I'm going to preach it every single time I'm up here. And it's not because I don't have anything better to preach, but I don't have anything better to preach than that. It really is. It really is the top topic. So, talking to God, pray, meditate, read the Bible. This is how he talks to us. This is how we understand his nature. Because when you do that, it's kind of like God sitting next to you on the table, helping you put the puzzle together. And eventually all these little pieces start dropping into place. And next thing you know, you're taking a nap and you wake up and half the puzzle's done. You didn't even do it. You just all of a sudden woke up and God gave you an understanding of what the puzzle's supposed to look like that you never had before. And when you get to that point when you can finish the puzzle and see the whole picture, then you know what you want to do? You want to be the cat that goes and helps other people put their puzzle together and helps them see what the bigger picture's supposed to be. Because we're all reading the same words. We all got the same puzzle. But God, some of us just can't figure it out. No matter how much time we stand there staring at the words, staring at the pieces, we can't put it together unless we have somebody helping us. So God's a good helper. So guys, if there's no other reason to talk to God, do it so that you could understand yourself better. Because really you can't. You can't, I promise you. I'm sure you've heard this preached before, but coming from a guy who's lived most of my life trying to convince myself that I'm okay, it doesn't work. God showed me a better way, and I'm starting to follow that. Now I'm trying to help you guys put your puzzles together. So this is how we understand God's nature. This is how we understand how to talk to God. And again, it's going all the way back. I got one other verse I'm going to throw at you, and it was talking about the prophets. It's in Numbers 12, 6 through 8. And this comes straight out, and this explains what I was just talking about. I like when the Bible can support what I'm talking about. It kind of legitimizes me a little bit more. If there were prophets among you, I would reveal myself in visions. I would speak to them in dreams. But not with my servant Moses. Of all my house, he is the one I trust. I speak to him face to face. So now this is like right before the prophets come along and right after his time with Moses. So he's pretty much telling people, hey guys, guess what? I ain't going to talk to any of you anymore because none of you are going to have the same rapport as Moses did. But I'll give these prophet dudes dreams, so pay attention to them. And do you think the people of Israel were very good and obedient and paid attention to the prophets? Nah. No, that doesn't work too well. So God's been trying to talk to us for a long time. He really has. So you can't sit here and say, I'm waiting for God to talk to me. He's been doing it for generations. We need to learn to talk to him, just like I as a father need to learn to talk to my children so that we can communicate and get along better. All right? So, how do we talk to each other? It's important to understand how to talk to each other, whether it be two people living in a house as husband and wife, or whether it be 30 men in brokenness coming together just to have a warm place to sleep. Whether it be a church of 40 or a church of 400. Whether it be an office of 6 or an office of 600. You need to learn to communicate in order to work together. Okay? One of the biggest misconceptions that I grew up with as a child of the 80s was sticks and stones may break your bones, but words can never hurt me. Guys, forget that old fable. Words can hurt you so bad. You know, we're supposed to be tough. That analogy that they gave us in the 70s was to make us tough. You can hit me with rocks and stones, it's okay, but nothing you say is going to hurt me. I'm too tough. Where do you think that got us? A lot of us got to the point where we're just burying stuff and not talking about it because we didn't want to be hurt. Words hurt. And the closer you are to somebody, the more their words can hurt you. So my first tip is going to be make sure you really get close to people you can trust. Don't let too many people close to you, because eventually the closer they get, the more their words are going to hurt you. Now, it doesn't mean that the person that's close to you and loves you isn't going to say things that hurt sometimes. We know that correction hurts. We know when God corrects us, it hurts. We know when a good friend corrects us, they call it iron sharpening iron, because it hurts. But we have to be honest with each other. You can't get corrected with soft words. Proverbs talk about that deception comes from soft kisses, while honesty and reality comes from harsh words sometimes. And we know, we talked about this before, that even though God loves us, God will correct us. God will show us wrath. Sometimes he'll show a whole nation's wrath. And I pray for this one that we're not under that demise right now, but we probably are. But words can hurt. Now, we're gonna kind of fast forward in the Bible. Most of what we were talking about is back at the beginning, but I told you there's a long stretch when God didn't really do the whole face-to-face thing. In fact, we really didn't hear that term again until we start reading Paul's letters. Because many times as Paul was as an apostle, Paul was out a lot. He would set up a church, he would plant it, he would get to know these guys, teach them, train them for years sometimes, and then he'd go out on the road. But he still wanted to talk to these guys. He still wanted to keep in touch with them, so he wrote letters. But for the important stuff, most of his letters would end with the simple term, I cannot wait to see you face to face. For I do not want to spend the ink to express this. I don't want to write it. I want to talk to you about it. So even then, he knew it was important. Even though he was just ministering people from afar, certain things needed to be face to face. So Paul actually picked this whole expression back up again, because for the first time in a long time, probably in our history, things were spreading out. The word was spreading out. Civilization was kind of spreading out to the point where I could start here and then go all the way over there and yet still have friends over here. That didn't always happen before, so we needed to learn to communicate from afar. Letters helped that, but it was always important to have the face-to-face. And again, remember that in this culture, in this society, this tech society. Remember COVID? I hope you do. It was only a few years ago, but they're all trying to make us forget anyways. But in that time, we were convinced that it was okay not to be face-to-face, not to be close. It was okay to separate from each other. It was okay to do video church. And it was the law that we couldn't gather. Wow, that was scary. It was a law that we couldn't gather. That hasn't happened before in history, has it? All right? But they used our fear. They used a deception to see if it would work. And it worked. And now we got this whole video society where people are working from home, people are preaching from home. I can't make it to church today, but darn it, I'm going to watch church online. Yeah, I get it, man. There is a blessing to that. I appreciate that when I'm out doing my food run on Sundays and I could pop on my phone and listen to a sermon. That's cool. But gosh, you can't make that your habit. You can't make that your norm. But boy, that's what's happened. And there's a lot of churches suffering from it right now because people don't really care about the face-to-face. Now, I'm going to flip it on the churches a little bit because, frankly, before COVID, not too many of the churches were making the effort to go face-to-face with their people. And I guarantee you, when COVID hit, there were a lot of people sitting home saying, I wish my pastor would call me, or an elder, or somebody would pray with me. And they didn't because the pastors and elders and leaders were home scared. All right? And that's why a lot of churches failed through that process. Don't get me wrong. We need to communicate face-to-face, and we can't let the fear of the world stop us from doing it, because that's how the world's going to get victory over us. Not by anything else, but by separating us, by taking our communication away, by making it so that we can't gather and share information. In fact, many things of society are being debunked right now because we're communicating so well. Most of the powers that be are so scared, they're calling it misinformation. It's not misinformation, it's the information that's proving that they've been lying to us for generations. So they got to shut it down. It is misinformation. They're misinformation. I won't get too much into politics, but you understand what I'm talking about. People are trying to change our perception of truth. We need to talk to each other. We need to communicate. We can't be putting on that size 10 collar unless we want our eyes to bulge out and our ears to turn purple. You understand what I'm saying? We got to be a little careful how we talk about things. So I'm going to go to a few verses of James because, man, James loved to talk about talking. He really did. He was one who really mastered it. He would come right out in his quick little book. We got plenty of things to talk about. But in James 3:5, it goes from 5 all the way through 8. I mean, first of all, he makes it really, really commonly understood. The tongue is a really dangerous instrument. Okay, the tongue, again, he refers to it as the smallest muscle, but it has the greatest effect, like a rudder on a ship. A little tiny rudder will turn a 10,000-pound ship. Saying something with the wrong words can turn a conversation faster than a 10,000-pound ship in the wrong direction, right into an iceberg that you can't get out of. So you got to be careful. He even says, to the point that he says the tongue is the fire that can corrupt the body and set one's life aflame. It means your words can kill you, man. Your words can take you so far off track that you crash and burn. It's not a fun place to be. People can tame all kinds of animals, but no one can tame a tongue. It is restless and evil and full of deadly poison. I can imagine James, he must have been lied to a lot. This dude must have had a lot of deception in his life, because, man, he cuts right to this. How do we stop it? Well, we stop, and again, James, right at the beginning. Understand, my brothers and sisters. This is 1:19 through 25. And James is a short book, so read this. This is good stuff. Understand, my brothers and sisters, and you've heard this, we must be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. And see, one of the biggest keys to communicating with people is to know when to listen. If you have people that just keep talking, they're never listening, you're not communicating, you're preaching. Leave the preachers to the pastors. But learn to listen sometimes, learn to communicate. When I talk to my boy, I need to stop and learn to listen to him. I need to hear what his concerns are. I need to let him vent. I need to let him get angry about his mom and not sit here and say, yes, I've been waiting for this. Nah. I paid that price years ago, so I'm getting the joy now for it, of him being able to share this with me. All right? So these are the things, and I take them in humility. Right? Because I want to keep that communication going. I want to keep that trust going. I want to nurture the communication that we have built. We can't take it for granted. Okay, you could be talking to somebody for a long time, and all of a sudden you start feeling comfortable with them, so you figure, maybe I'll take this for granted a little bit and say something stupid, and all of a sudden you've offended somebody that's been a friend for a while. Don't let your guard down with talking. Don't assume that you can start being rude and I was just kidding. I was just joking. How many times have you heard that? Seriously? Somebody offends you really bad, and as soon as they realize they offended you, they say, I'm just kidding. They weren't. They just realized that they went too far. And they got to kind of backpedal a little bit and protect themselves from probably getting a beat down. All right? But that's what happens. We don't think. And as soon as the words comes out, you can't take them back. That's why James says, be slow to talk. Listen, hear, process. There's no rule anywhere that says when somebody says something to them, you need to respond within 3 seconds. Somebody asks you a question, quick, give them the first thing that pops in your head. Well, no. Wait. Talk to God real quick. Sometimes the first thing that comes out your mouth is not the thing you want to be saying. Think about it. That's what he's talking about here. We're going to finish up on one other part of communication that's very destructive, and I'm sure it's going to really resonate around here. It's called gossip. Okay? It's called gossip. Listen, we got to be really, really careful about gossip, friends. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again, that sometimes it's okay to be informed about what other people are like, to get wisdom about how to approach somebody. But holy cow, if you want to know somebody, talk to them. Okay? Gossip is even a breaking a commandment. Exodus 20:16, the 9th commandment. You must not testify falsely. That's lying. That's gossip. That's slander. What's the difference between gossip and slander? One incorrect fact. Gossip's bad enough. Gossip's sharing something that's true that you really shouldn't be sharing. Could be personal, could be private. It's not your business to tell. Slander is when you get one fact wrong, one detail, one little thing. All of a sudden you're lying. You're ruining somebody's character. And it takes a lot for that person's character to come back. And that person did nothing except for get talked about. See, I could write a book on this one just like James did, because I've had to live through this a lot in my Christian walk. You got to just be aware that it's out there and don't participate. In a group like this, I'll tell you straight up, when you hear it, shut it down. Be the big enough person to not feed into it. Now, you don't have to go tell the other person, hey, this person's talking about you. That's not helping the situation. But what you do is if you hear something about somebody else and you're curious about it, you know what? Go talk to them. Hey, you know, I heard this. I'm not going to tell you who I heard it from. It doesn't matter. But it got me curious, so I just wanted to come to you about it. I started doing that more in my life. And you'd be amazed how many people just back down immediately. So many of us are used to being defended by our keyboards and our screens to say whatever we want and be as bold and outgoing as we want behind the computer screen. But when somebody calls you on the phone and says, yo, I kind of want to talk about what we were just texting about, man, they just go into a little, oh, okay. Or they don't answer the phone and they send you a text. They don't want to talk. Because they know once they talk face to face, they can't just use the keyboard and edit and delete and resend. They have to actually talk about what they're feeling. Oh my gosh. So last verse, last thing we're going to focus on. And this was actually supposed to be the main verse of the whole thing. I got 5 minutes to talk about it. Matthew 18, 15 through 17. All right, this is the verse that we touched on a couple weeks ago when I was talking about anger. Because the biggest factor of anger is lack of communication, lack of resolution. Now again, we're in a house environment here, but it doesn't matter if you're in a house or in an office. There's going to be conflict. There's going to be disagreement. Now, in a house like this, it's cool. We're Christ-based. We really are. Whether you're just an overnighter, whether you're long-term, we serve Christ here. So you're going to hear the truth of the Bible when we talk about resolution. Okay? I told you before that you're going to get offended. You're going to get angry. But staying offended and staying angry is a choice. So, what happens when you get offended? What happens when somebody says something you don't like? Well, we'll be amazed. It says in its own little way we talk to them. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read the verses. And I'm going to kind of stop along the way to kind of break it down and explain to you exactly where they're going with this. So it's actually titled, Correcting Another Believer. Because in a way that's what we're doing. We're doing correction, but there's a good way to do it. And this is what he's telling us. If another believer, remember that, another believer, okay? This doesn't apply to pagans on the street that don't care about God or Jesus or righteousness or moral, okay? So first of all, we need to make sure we're on a level playing field. I think most of us here are. Different levels, but we all understand Christ, we understand God. So this applies to this house and this room, so we're going to kind of interpret it and use it that way. So, if another believer sins against you, makes you angry, offends you, whatever, we don't need to really split the hairs. You know what I'm talking about when you get that little, why'd they say that? Here's what we do. You go privately and point out the offense. Okay? First thing, privately. Don't call them out at lunch. Don't call them out at chapel in front of 20 other people. Okay? Find a time to go talk to them privately. Yo, can we make 5 minutes? If you got a really busy day, talk to them about scheduling some time. Be the man about it. Be courageous enough to say, yo, this needs to be resolved. Can we talk? Do it. Try it. Here's what happens. If the other person listens and confesses it, meaning they own it, you're right. I'm sorry, I didn't realize it. And a lot of times you're going to find out that's what it is. They're going to say something. The other person's going to be like, wow, dude, I am so sorry. I didn't realize that happened. I didn't realize you took it that way. I'm sorry, we're good, right? And you know what? You're better than good. You're better than you were when you started. Because you work together to mutually understand each other when you didn't understand each other before. Understand, communicate. Ta-da! You understand that? By communicating, we understand the other person. If we don't, and we just go over to the other somebody else and start talking about it, what are we doing? We're gossiping. And we've blown the opportunity to fix the problem. We've blown the opportunity to make a better connection with our friend. And we've sinned. Don't forget that. All right? So, now what happens if it doesn't work? We understand what happens if it's successful, if it doesn't work. So, but if you are unsuccessful, this is where 16 starts, take one or two others with you and go back again, so that everything you say may be confirmed by 2 or 3 other witnesses. Now, go back again, that means go back to a private place. We're still not to the point where we're calling them out. But you know righteously somebody else is wrong. And your effort to try to guide them is not working, but it still needs to be corrected. We can't just let it go. So you go to other brothers that you know are more mature than you, leaders, maybe a pastor, maybe somebody who's been here long term, maybe a worker, and you go with them in that quiet place, and you say, yo, listen, I really tried, but listen to Pastor. Maybe he'll explain it to you better. And Pastor will explain it. And not only that, but now you'll have a witness, so if this guy cracks off and still kind of goes, then it's not just your word versus his word. Now you got other people of integrity understanding we have a bigger problem here. And now we got to identify it. It's no longer just one person offending another person. It's no longer a conflict of 2 people. It's now a yeast in the bread. Okay, it's now a problem that's going to possibly grow. So it needs to be dealt with. How do we do that? Well, guess what? It says it right here. I love this Bible. It's just got all the answers. So, I lost my place, though. I really need to get like a highlighter or something. Thank you, 17. If the person still refuses to listen, you take your cases to the church. In this case, this is when you call it out. This is when you get pastor and say, yo, we need to have a meeting in the chapel with all hands on deck, and 2 or 3 of us need to make an announcement to the group. And you call that person out in front of the group righteously. Okay? You got to. You got to. You can't sit there and say, oh, I don't want to hurt his feelings, though he might get upset. I don't want him to get angry at me. So you're willing to sacrifice the balance of the entire situation. No. Call them out righteously. And again, at this point, we already know we've taken a righteous approach. We already know we've shared with 2 or 3 other righteous brothers and taken a righteous approach. So, you know what? In a way, all rules are off. We are no longer on a level playing field. We're on a plane of authority of God, trying to inflict that authority on somebody who's disrupting other people from living in the Spirit. That's worth fighting for. That's righteous anger. That's when you stand up. And what's it tell us? What's it tell us then after that? Then, if he or she won't accept the church's decision, you treat that person like a pagan or a corrupt taxpayer. I mean, the tax collectors were bad enough. The corrupt ones, you know what they did with them? They stoned them. They hung them. All right? Kick them out, is what he's saying. Get rid of them. Somebody, I'm sure you guys have seen it if you've been here long enough. I'm sure you've seen somebody get kicked out of this house. Because they didn't, yeah, Michael, you've been here too long to not. But it didn't just happen on the first effort. It didn't just happen when one thing went wrong. It took several efforts. It took several strikes. And I'm sure the people in this house, the leadership in this house, handled it the right way. Will you, when conflict arises, will you handle it the right way? Will you have the courage to approach somebody and talk to them? I've done it driving a few times. I get angry driving and I realize it doesn't do me any good. But there are times like in my town, like when I'm driving and somebody cuts me off and I know they're going to the grocery store. I know it, and I'm going to the grocery store too. So rather than getting all angry, I'll follow them to their parking spot and I'll certainly roll down the window and I'll just tell them just like that, what you did was very wrong. You almost hurt me. You could have crashed me. Please pay more attention on the road. Man, that really just blows people up. I mean, first they're scared. Because I'm getting out of my car and following them in the parking lot. So oh my gosh, they're like locking the doors, rolling up the windows. But you don't go there angry. You don't threaten them. You don't pull a massive flashlight out of the car and go up to talk to them. All right? But I found that rather than getting angry, if I just go talk to my neighbors, because these people are my neighbors, they live in the same little dinky one-light town I do. All right? But by talking to them, it diffuses the whole situation. And I guarantee you the next time they think about pulling out of that stop sign without stopping all the way and cutting me off, they'll probably think about that conversation. And they'll probably say, I'm glad that guy didn't have a big flashlight or a gun. Right? But it's truth. Old me wouldn't have done it. Old me would have just got mad, flipped them off, maybe throwing something at them, a bottle of water, whatever. Now I'm like, I'm just going to talk to these people. Maybe that's the prophet in me. I'm all right, just boldly convicting somebody now. It's all right. If you do it righteously, not angry. And it goes back to what James tells us, be slow to anger. Listen. Respond slowly, not angry. Defuse situations. Guys, all the solutions to our problems, they're right here. And I know we need to find them. I know a lot of us know there's a really cool puzzle to put together. And a lot of us are struggling to figure out how the pieces fit. But I promise you they do. And once you understand how they fit, this life, it does get pretty fun. It does. It gets pretty rewarding. It gets pretty joyful. Doesn't mean it's not broken. Doesn't mean it's not hurtful. But there's ways to get through it where you can actually smile, waking up every day and going to sleep every day. And that's because you understand the puzzle that God's trying to get us to put together. So talk to each other, gentlemen. Don't talk about each other. Learn to use each other to be stronger. Learn to talk through each other so that you can know when you're choking yourself too much and when sometimes you just need a little bit of extra air. So I really hope this resonates with you. Let's close out in prayer. Dear Father, thank you for your word today. I felt your presence here in this room from the minute we stepped in, and it was beautiful praise and worship, and I know it was a solid message that just needed to be heard. So Father, I thank you for allowing me the gift to be able to communicate and talk and share your word with these men, so that they can learn better how to communicate and talk with each other so that they can honor you in all that they do. In the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen. Have a good night, gentlemen.